ever Q&A within the Austin Startup Spotlight. And I am joined with Joel Pennington, the CEO and founder of Blackdot, based out of Austin, Texas. Welcome.
Good morning.
Great to have you here. Thank you very much for doing this and kind of being the pilot for us. So yeah, really looking forward to it. Hopefully it's the start of a good series from our side. So you need to set the benchmark now.
Okay, thanks for the pressure. Appreciate it.
No worries. Listen, so the first sort of thing that I wanted to know from my side was you started it obviously in 2018, Blackdot. You were in stealth for a couple of years. Obviously, you popped out of stealth, and that's when I heard of you. Really exciting. Like I said, I branded you as one of the most exciting companies coming out of Austin right now that
Awesome.
maybe not many people have heard of. But can you tell us a little bit more about the company, where the idea began, more about the brand, things like that?
Yeah, happy to. In 2015, I founded a company called Clear Access in Portland, Oregon area. It was a remote home networking for service providers platform. And so that would enable AT&T, Verizon, et cetera, to remotely help you if you have issues in your home with Wi-Fi or bandwidth, et cetera. We sold that to Cisco Systems in 2012. So that was great experience in terms of founding the company, venture-backed, all the way through an exit with a reputable company like Cisco. And during the time of acquisition, I decided to move to Austin just to get a change of scenery, get more sunlight, cut down on the vitamin D supplements. And the property that I bought had a small vineyard on it, very small, like 24 vines. But I embraced that. I did a 2-year Texas Tech winemaking certification. I learned how to grow grapes, how to ferment, how to go from grape to bottle effectively, and how to manage a consumer brand for the first time.
Yeah.
And that was really interesting experience, and it was very orthogonal to what I had done in tech. But it was a good combination, and I was doing that while I was with Cisco, so it enabled me to create and do something that was very motivating for me in terms of building. I was still able to build just kind of in a very small sense. That experience enabled me to then help out a company called Bellwether Coffee, and they're based in Berkeley, and they've invented the world's first coffee roaster for cafes. And what's interesting there is that, roasting is very difficult. 10 years of experience to be able to get beans to have full expression, and they were dealing with specialty coffee. So the really high-end Ethiopian Wotokonga wash station number 6, the really good stuff, the stuff that is very delicate, and the stakes are high if you don't get that right. So their model was hardware, software, cloud, centralize the art of coffee roasting, and how they would do that is there would be a Bellwether roaster, for example, in a cafe. A barista with no roasting experience would be able to go up to the unit. And on the digital display, the iPad or tablet, they could choose the green beans that they're about to roast. They can pick the SKU. And what happens is as soon as they do that, it downloads the roasting profile or the recipe for roasting those beans to perfection into that unit. And what happened in the back end in Berkeley is Bellwether has hired some of the best coffee roasters in North America or perhaps further afield. But what their job is to take all the specialty green beans and figure out the roasting profiles for us. So that's all they do is crack the code, so to speak.
Right. Okay. Well, I'm only used to Starbucks, so.
Yeah. Well, fair enough. Well, there's once you taste
up.
the good stuff, it's hard to go back. So maybe you should stay in your Starbucks world.
No.
They
I'm
can get a little expensive at $4 a cup or what have you.
Cool. Okay, perfect. Cool. And obviously I love the concept of the business. I've said it many a times. I've tried to plug you to my network a load of times. And I mentioned I haven't got a tattoo yet, but this is the sort of thing that may make me delve into it. I've seen some of the reviews where it's a lot less painless. You're lying down on the chair. It's a robot that does it to pretty much near perfection. So it tempted me to plunge into my first ever tattoo. But I wanted to ask you, have you got a tattoo? Have you got any tattoos? Is this kind of what sprung it? Or did you only get your first tattoo when you actually started the business?
Yeah. So when I was doing the work at Bellwether, that was the first time I had been surrounded by people with tattoos. Right. And so I'm doing work with them to be able to help them figure out how to get that roaster into cafes. Why aren't people roasting themselves? What would be the benefits of having their own retail coffee? So that was that assignment. And fortunately, the wine experience in terms of profiles and how to go ahead and look at expression and the coffee and wine share some of the same tenets. So when I'm in the world of coffee, I'm surrounded by people with tattoos, and I start asking them questions like, where'd you get that? Why'd you get that? How'd that feel, etc. And what I started to realize is that a lot of people, especially kind of younger folks, so to speak, wanted smaller tattoos that were very, very detailed. And they would have to fly to like New York or LA to get those, and they might have to be on a really long waiting list.
Yeah.
And so I started to say, all right, well, that's interesting. And that style really resonated with me. It's very different than what I'd seen on the street in terms of, big American traditional thick lines, lots of color. It was these like pieces of art that really spoke to me kind of, at that level. So once I saw that and I realized that, you'd have to wait a year and like how hard it was to get that kind of art, I was like, I wonder if we can bring technology into this to solve that piece of the problem. Not solving the creative piece
Yeah.
in terms of art creation, but to solve the execution piece, because you have to be like a Jedi Knight to be able to pull that off. So it was kind of with that I formed Blackdot as a way to be able to provide the execution capabilities for certainly highly detailed tattoos, but the it's kind of backwards compatible in a sense in terms of like even lower fidelity tattoos or not as complicated tattoos, the device can do a stellar job with that. So to answer your questions in terms of tattoos, I didn't have any at that point because I really wasn't inspired by anything that I had seen in Austin or Portland or wherever I had been in the past. That kind of lower fidelity tattoo and focusing on coverage wasn't my thing, so to speak. So we had developed the prototype of the device. We put our first dots on somebody in 2019. And then we created this kind of handheld version of the device. And its sole function was to put dots that have very, very good control in terms of depth in the amount of punctures on people of all makes and models. So I volunteered to be the first person to get a tattoo with this
You were the guinea pig.
dot. Yeah, and it was the coolest party in Austin. I had like 40 people over. I had artists and I had a technical team and investors and family and what have you. So I have a tattoo on my hip that is this kind of starburst, if you will. It has these 24 different rays. Each ray is 5 dots. So 5 dots going in all different directions. And I had 24 different people work on me for that tattoo. So each person would do
Ah,
5 dots. So I started, I think my CTO was the first person to do the first 5 dots. And then he handed this device. This was the handheld version, not the automated version that we have
yeah.
now. But he handed this device to my wife. She laid down 5 dots, a little bit different depth. So it was a test tattoo. And then gave it to at the time, I think my oldest daughter was 9. So she has it.
Wow.
She's gloved up and masked, and we have all the, the protocol. She lays, I mean, and then to my 7-year-old, and their dots were like, 99.9% percentile in terms of the quality of those dots.
Well, you're saying it now.
So
You're saying it now with the confidence, and it went well. But you did put it on your hip just in case anything went wrong. I'm
it was
presuming.
a test tattoo, and it was probably that big. And yes, exactly. I mean, yeah, maybe I should have like, it's kind of a badge of honor, and I could have, I guess, put that on my forearm. It's just, I don't know if I want to have to tell this, very long story every time somebody sees it. But we did 24 tattoos, and that might have been one of the world's most collaborative tattoos. We actually had a Guinness Book of World Record holder in with us, a tattoo advisor who he and his twin brother had performed all the tattoos for Julia Naus, who is the world's most tattooed woman. So I already had Guinness Book of World Record kind of thing happening in the ethos, and
Oh,
if I
cool.
would have kind of lodged that, maybe I would have picked up that award for that tattoo.
To be fair, it's funny you mentioned about having to like take flights and be on long waiting lists. Or one of our directors, when we first came out to Austin to look at office space and things like that a couple of years ago, a gentleman named Ollie, he was looking for like a geometric, really, really detailed B to be put on the back of his arm. And
Hmm.
found it's one of the leading guys in Austin for tattoos. I can't remember the name of the person, but he was on Instagram with him. And the guy was just like, I don't have any time. Can you do in 2 months' time? And obviously, we were there for like 10 days just to spec out office space, things like that. And, if there was a solution like yours, it's a case of you can have that geometric beat to the finest detail, but it's a robot that's performing that. So it's funny how that sort of overlaps with a problem that we've had with people in our company as well. Okay, cool, nice. And following on to the next sort of thing, obviously, this kind of detail is crazy. It just makes you and the company even more interesting. These little stories that don't always get out. Um, but prior to launching Black Dot, you worked in a bunch of different roles. You sold your previous startup to Cisco, and then you stayed there in a capacity as one of the heads, an executive figure in there. How does that kind of compare to being in the fast-paced startup environment? How was that switch for you to go back to that?
Yeah, I think I mean it's a change, and my career has been professional career has always been one very different thing after another. I think sometimes I come back to some things. I mean, it was startup, with the Cisco, and then getting into Cisco, which is a big machine. That was great experience in terms of mainstreaming what you built
Yeah,
and making sure that it can have good longevity and have a further reach. So that was great in terms of from an accomplishment perspective. And then it was that time that I had two, they were very young daughters at the time. So Cisco was really good in that, startup life is like challenging. And so I was able to, with Cisco for that 6 years, spend more time with my young girls and have a really, really good life work balance. It allowed me to get my fluids up and get ready for another round of startup. I don't know if I could have gone like teach their own in terms of what they're capable of, but I don't know if I can go from startup to startup to startup.
yeah,
It's just too much, especially when you're all in on what you're doing. So that Cisco piece, that role there was just really refreshing to give me a break and allow me to have kind of a clean slate to kind of ideate and think about what I want to do next. And I mean, you give up things when you go from big company to small company, but you gain things too. So like salary and all that type of
yeah,
stuff, it was dramatically different, as different can be as you're kind of launching a company. So all that goes away. All the the juicy benefits and healthcare and all that stuff. It's a much different plan, at least as you're launching a company. So there were certainly adjustments in that regard, but I was refreshed and ready to. And part of this for me is, I've done tech, wine, coffee, right? And so I'm thinking to myself, well, what do I want to do next? And it has to have something with some edge. It's got to be something for me that is, really cool and something that people want to talk about and something that excites folks. I don't want to be going to parties and events and say, someone asks what you do and I have some SaaS software that figures out like what the best, kind of optimization of insurance policies.
yeah.
Like that will just bore the snot out of everybody. So I want something that's fun for me, fun for my family, and there's not a lot of things that fall into that category. So once you find something that excites you at that level, and for me, that was Black Dot. That was a home run. So if I'm putting everything into a startup, and if I can have that component of it that just genuinely excites me at this kind of very fundamental level, it makes things a lot easier.
Cool. Okay, perfect. Yeah, and I think you've hit the nail on the head there. Like, it is something that people want to talk about. Like, even me, who has no vested interest in this, it's a case of it's so cool just to hop on and talk about it and like the stories and things like that and what you're doing. It's like I said, one of the coolest concepts I've heard in Austin right now. So, kudos to you and Jan and
Yeah,
the rest of
cheers.
the team.
Yeah,
Um,
thank you.
from your side, obviously, with that kind of growth that you've got at the minute and the traction you're getting, and obviously fundraising and coming
Yeah.
out of stealth, what, and obviously it's relatively early since you've come out of stealth, but what's your sort of proudest moment to date with Black Dot, with what you've achieved?
Yeah, that's interesting. I think, we've had a lot of milestones. There's a lot of things I could point to in terms of, we crossed this bridge, we got this financing, we did this. So I'm a long time Smashing Pumpkins follower, fan, whatever the right word is there. But I've been to 30, I think 30 shows over 31 years, US, in UK, Belgium, Netherlands, Melbourne, Australia. So I've seen them a lot of incarnations. So that's like an important band for me. And as I started to think about the artwork that we wanted to launch with, and the artists, one of the things I wanted to do is not just focus on tattoo artists and making purely their art available. Yes, I want to do that, and we've done that with Omer Tunca,
Yeah.
who's a renowned artist out of Istanbul. But I wanted to also show the power of the platform in terms of unexpected art, or art that people wouldn't necessarily think you can effectively put into tattoos. So, one of our launch artists is Tyler Hobbs, who's based here in Austin.
Yeah.
He's a renowned generative artist, which means he uses computer code and algorithms to output art. And like technically, that artwork is insanely precise and detailed to be difficult, if not impossible for a human to replicate. So we actually give Tyler and his work, generative art, a home now in tattoo with, all the integrity in terms of how they would license that and receive royalties every time a tattoo is delivered. So we had those two artists, and then I thought to myself, well, it'd be really good to have a beachhead into the world of music and entertainment, and to be able to bring iconic artwork into tattoo. So, it didn't take me long to kind of think about, well, maybe I can weigh in on this one.
Yeah.
I looked at, if I think about the Smashing Pumpkins and their collective body of work, Melancholy in the Infinite Sadness, which was debuted in 2000 in 1995, that had sold 10 million copies, double album. The artwork on there is super revered. I think most people think that of the 1990s, it's like the most well thought artwork, and then in terms of the history of rock and roll, it probably has a place there as well. So I reached out to a gentleman named John Craig. John Craig was the artist behind all that work. I know a couple of the band members from the Pumpkins, so I was able to kind of mention that, which helped to grease the wheels for John in terms of trust, and I have some tentacles to the band, etc. And so I worked with him to be able to license that artwork. So the Star Nymph, which is the cover, the girl in the star, and then all the glyphs, the small pieces that are in the lyric book, and we've launched two of the drops. So one of the drops so far, the other two drops coming. So for me, on a personal level, that's a total home run, to be able to take like my favorite band, the best art, what I feel is like the best artwork, especially as it relates to putting it as tattoos. There's other artwork that's amazing as well, but might not be tattoo friendly. But to be able to work with that artist, and to know that artist who's, John's 79 or maybe he's 80 now in rural Wisconsin, he's been retired from commercial work for like 10 or 15 years, right? To be able to bring him out of retirement, and then to be able to have something where he's going to get meaningful royalties every time one of his designs is executed as a tattoo, and for his name to be, front and center in terms of being associated with that work, instead of it just people calling it's the Pumpkins work, it's really John Craig's. I feel super good about that. I feel super good about giving that artist the recognition that he deserves, even though it took a little while for that to finally happen, but we're doing it. To be able to give him passive income by way of the royalties, and for me in terms of my my patronage to the band, to be able to enable that artwork to be available to Pumpkins fans wherever, where the artwork looks as it should, right? So it's identical. It's not some interpretation of it or some derivative work or whatever. It's exactly the way it's the artwork that we've been following for years and years and years. So like there's so many things there that are meaningful for me. So collectively, I think that's probably my proudest accomplishment or work.
And that's one of the things I like in terms of the royalty sides of things, because I thought, one of your barriers to entry is you might be sort of jeopardizing your relationship with the industry, bringing robots into it, and tattoo artists might be sat there thinking, well, what are we going to do if we're up against a near perfect machine? But the fact that you can do it with, for example, the artist you have in Istanbul, Before he even picks a pen up to tattoo someone in the morning, royalties will be streaming in from the artwork that's being used. And I think that's where you're going to make a connection with the industry. And, it's
Yeah,
such a cool concept. And then that goes on to, like you said, do you do exclusive artwork for other stars? Do you do very, very limited quantities of certain pumpkins bits and, the most famous bits of the album? And let's say there's 20 exclusive pieces. And then that becomes, and it kind of merges into that NFT style
sure.
kind of stuff. And that's one of the cool, because the expansion you can do with that, it's not just a robot that tattoos. There's so many other different parts, which, like I said, that's why I love it so much. There's so many different
Yeah.
sort of avenues you can take and verticals. So
That's right. There's no shortage. And one thing we try to do from a naming, I did this prematurely. One thing we try to do from a communications perspective is this isn't a robot. I mean, it's not walking around. It's
yeah,
not a GM factory floor. When people say robot, the first thing that comes to mind is like robots are coming to take my job.
yeah,
This is a device, is what it is. And so it's a device that artists can use to in collaboration with or as an extension. For example, I have at our studio today what some top people have called the number one line artist in the world, tattoo artist, right? And he's doing a hybrid tattoo with us, where our Black Dot device does a portion of it, and he finishes that off with his own work. So that's just an example of it being like a tool that artists can use in that way as well. So I just bring that up because I've seen some stuff about robots, etc.
yeah,
And that's not really what we're doing. We're trying to be able to create a platform so artists can have passive income and also enable artists, whether you're a tattoo artist or visual artist, to really push the boundaries in terms of what can happen by way of a tattoo.
yeah. It's really, really cool. And, when we first sort of connected, and obviously we pushed out the post that kind of connected myself and you, what, way back in October, maybe.
Yep, that was
You
launch.
were gaining a little bit of traction in terms of like VCs that were in my network and things like that. And I know you're currently going through angel rounds and VC rounds, and you're looking to raise funds. So this is, a chance for you to plug. How do people do that? What's the best way of getting in contact with you? And what are you looking for from your side?
Yeah, I appreciate that. So on the website, we've architected this such that we have a mechanism to allow really angel or institutional investors to get a look at what we're doing. The rules from the SEC changed a couple of years ago to allow us to publicly advertise or solicit investment. So there's a page. Our URL is not necessarily straightforward to say, but it's black dot
Yeah,
tattoo or black dot period tattoo.
I'll stick it. I'll
Um,
stick it in a link anyway.
okay, there you go. So that's how you end up on the homepage, and then there's also some links to be able to take you to an investment side, which shows the market size, what we've done in the past. There's a video there that helps to be able to step someone through kind of ideation up to what we've done at launch and looking forward. So we're looking for angels that can participate. Ideally, they can add some value in some way, shape, or form down the road. That's just handy to have an investor community where people have different skill sets. So that would be great. If people just want to be passive, that's fine as well. But we are allowing angels to be able to participate. I think that's important for a number of reasons. We're also looking for institutional to be able to lead a priced round, and we want to be able to do that round this year. So we kind of have both in progress. There's a confluence of there's a marketplace, there's hard tech in what we're doing. There's a retail component. We have the device, but we're not selling the device. This is not sell it. We're not a product company. We're really a brand
Yeah,
and a service. And so we'll have a few of our own Black Dot retail locations. We have our flagship here in Austin. I mean, very different, very cool, a futuristic component. But the way that you get scale is to have the Black Dot device located either within other high-end tattoo studios, so studio in studio, where a Black Dot person operates that device because of the complexity and the knowledge and know-how. And then there's also studio in a store. So we can be in a Givenchy store in New York. I could be in, a top skateboard shop in San Diego. I can be, I mean, there's a whole host of different types of retail organizations where we'd make sense. And I think that's important as an investor looks at this, that, we're not trying to be Chick-fil-A. This isn't a capital intensive business in terms of you have to have a brick and mortar component to it. We have very low footprint. Our tattoos from Tyler Hobbs were $9,875 each, and they sold out in the first 2 weeks. And so our lowest price tattoo at that point was $1,000. So this isn't $75 Woody Woodpecker
Yeah.
stuff that we're doing. It's high-end artwork, and that's where we'll start. We'll start at the very high end and do as good a job as we can, working with different types of artists and high-end brands. So if anyone's interested, they can go to our website. There's a little form that they can fill out, provide their details. I'd be happy to be able to have other folks affiliated with the company.
Cool. Like I said, in the post, I'll leave a link to that for anyone that is actually interested in jumping on there. I've looked at the website. The website's real cool. So kudos to whoever made that for you.
Yeah, thanks. It's
It's
better on a desktop. So if someone has the choice between
yeah,
looking at it on a phone or desktop, pick the browser.
yeah. It's really good. It's a little bit different than just your standard website that has a menu, and it's not got any sort of there's no sort of user feel to it. You're going through, you're scrolling through, and things are changing as you. It's just cool, basically.
Yeah, that's fun.
So anyone that hasn't, check out that website, and any investors that are interested, I'll leave a link for that. From my side, one of the things that I'm always interested in, as you know, on my day-to-day basis, I work with clients as a recruiter. So that's kind of where most of my interest lies within companies like yours. Um, but one of the things with you obviously doing the work at Cisco in an executive capacity, you've had your own startup and scaled it successfully and exited. What sort of skills, qualities, attributes do you make at this early stage that are key? Because obviously the initial hires are the key hires. So what do you look for in those people?
Yeah, so I've learned some lessons in past startups and
Yeah.
just with age. And one of them was when we founded the company, put it together to be able to create kind of like a culture fit purpose list. And that was a really healthy exercise because what we did on that is we pretty much documented what we expect from people affiliated with the company, and where the company is going. And it was really helpful because, I have a book that's on the side that kind of talks about my background and ideation and a lot about Blackdot and the steps or what have you. But there's a chapter in there called Missionaries, Not Mercenaries, right? And the idea there is, to the degree that somebody really feels like this is an important thing for them to be affiliated with and pursue, opposed to just doing it for the paycheck, that goes a long ways, just in terms of culture and dynamics. There's nothing wrong with a paycheck, but if you're in it solely for the paycheck, then things start to crumble on the edges. So that's an important criteria as we look at whether it's an employee. I try to apply that lens as well when I work with contractors or even agencies or external folks as well. Find out what their motivations are, and to the degree that this resonates, it doesn't mean that people that work with us or for us have to have tattoos. That's not a prereq. It's but certainly art intersecting culture, something that has a very modern component to it. That's paramount. But that list has been really good for us in that if we see certain kinds of behaviors from a contractor in terms of, whatever it is, committing to do something and not following up with it, for example, right? And if you start to see that a lot, you can go back to that document and you're like, hey, that's a behavior that we don't support. And it just helps you give conviction, because sometimes when people have that disposition of like, I commit to do this, I'm going to do this, but they don't. We call them, I call them gunnas. I'm going to do this, but you don't. Sometimes you can fall back and say, well, that person has these other redeeming qualities, though, right? Or maybe, but that person was hard to find, or like maybe this will get. If I have something that says what we don't, what doesn't work for you as a company, it's really easy to kind of point to that and be like, that's something that we said up front we weren't gonna tolerate. This we know is not good, and it just helps us. It's just a really nice kind of guiding light in terms of contributors and people, and who stays with the company and who doesn't work out.
Yeah. And we see that a lot as well. A lot of the people that we place into our clients, we're looking for them to actually have an interest and a passion in that, as opposed to, okay, I want to get 20% more than the salary that I'm on at the minute. Because you do get
Yeah,
people like that, they're in it for the wrong reasons, and then 6 months down the line, then another job comes up that's paying 20% more than the salary. And it's just a high burn rate of people, if you're looking at it through that lens. And so I think,
it's
yeah,
hard to flush that out though,
it is very
because
hard.
people can, weave a good story. So
Exactly.
it's
They can, but to be fair, when they're speaking to people like us, because they know obviously we have a vested interest in things happening, they usually
mm,
are a little bit more open with us in terms of saying, right, I want a 20% increase. I don't really care what industry. And if I qualify it that way, I know this person, they're in it for the money. And obviously the money is important. You want people to be, remunerated well and for what they do. But also, it's nice for them to actually have a passion and interest in what they're building, rather than sitting on something that they don't actually want to work on.
that's
Uh,
right.
which is it's a fine line of finding that. And
Agreed.
the final thing, to sort of round off, an excellent call, and I actually think you've set the bar very high for the pilot episode here. If I'm completely honest, Joel,
Oh my.
is what does the future hold for Black Dot?
That's a great question. So if you would have asked me that question maybe back in 2019, early days, my response probably would have been to be able just to make tattooing more accessible to more people, and also to open up the possibilities in terms of what tattoos are from a design perspective. I think I would have stayed squarely in that tattoo bucket back then. But what I've kind of realized, just by talking to various folks that either have our tattoos or that are looking at the company from different angles, is that we're really, you know, kind of creating a new industry. It's tattoo, but with the way that we're approaching it, in terms of artwork and artists, the digital component as well. Um, I mean, I can see a time where, I mean, we're already starting to kind of get into that, but it's this bridge from the physical realm to the digital realm as well. And so as I know, things like metaverse are all kind of, maybe a little bit slower in terms of adoption and interest right now than they were a couple of years ago. But nonetheless, you can imagine a world where there's, for example, my youngest daughter plays Roblox like
Yeah,
way too much, right? Way too much. She loves to show me her avatars and how they're dressed up and stuff like that. But as virtual reality and like avatars and your digital representation of you becomes more prolific, which it certainly will, then the fact that we have the tattoos and we have digital representations of them, you know, it's not a stretch to think about how you could have your actual tattoos on your avatar to be able to carry that over into that realm, or you have your chill pad in the metaverse and you have the artwork of your tattoos, or to be able to have tattoos on you and have an app where if you scan over it, you can then quickly see the artist and the story and what limited edition number it is. So there's all these really interesting vectors that are going to stem out. The fact that our tattoos are pain reduced, you barely feel them. It's not pain free, but the scale from 1 to 10, it's like a 0 for a lot of people, which is no pain. Sometimes a 1, sometimes a 2. That opens up tattoo for a lot of people. There's a lot of innovation in inks. We're starting to see inks that you can turn on or turn off, which is really interesting now, to have optionality and to be able to really have your skin as a canvas that can change over time as you change as well. So there's a lot of forces at work, I think, that fall under this kind of skin creation category. And the way that we're approaching it, having a device doing the busy work and focusing on the artist and the artwork and bringing that together, and then having paths into this digital realm, I think it's really exciting. And I think it's going to keep my engineers and researchers stimulated for a long time. So it's not just a matter of, the finish line is this, amazing tattoo. I think there's all these other things that we'll be able to do in years to come.
Perfect. Well, listen, that rounds off the pilot episode for this. Thank you so much. Like I said, you've set the bar extremely high for whoever follows next. Um, listen, we're about to wrap it up. 30 seconds. Anything you want to plug with Black Dot that you haven't already? Anything that you want to mention? Any shout outs? Anything? The floor is yours for 30 seconds to plug
Yeah,
you on.
yeah, cheers. I think we've done a good job. I think that, investors to take a peek at what we're doing. I think come into the look, um, sizing up the market. We published the TAM is, 3.5 billion, but it's largely a cash business.
Yeah,
So it's significantly bigger. And the thing is too is that the younger generations, Gen Z, Gen Y. I mean, Gen Z, we're seeing it go this direction in terms of not only more people having tattoos, but more tattoos per person.
yeah,
So the growth is just really, really interesting, that curve. And once you get your first tattoo and the seal is broken, the likelihood of you getting more is high. And the likelihood of you wanting to get another tattoo that looks amazing that you have predictability over versus maybe your options of where you are in whatever geography. I think that there's a repeat kind of purchase engagement that goes along with tattooing that not everybody immediately recognizes. So that's what I'd say for investors as you're looking at this. For people looking for tattoos, we are booked out through end of March. Right now, we're very much supply constrained. We only have one Black Dot device in operation in Austin. But feel free to go to the website. Let us know what you're interested in. The artwork that we have now is just a reflection of the launch. We have a pipeline of really interesting stuff coming up. As we have more devices and more presence, then we can unlock more and more artwork.
perfect. Joel, thank you so much for your time. It's been absolutely amazing to hear a little bit more, and I'm even more interested than when we first jumped on this call. So, anyone in the
Awesome.
Austin Startup Spotlight, anyone in my network, please go and show Joel some love. I will link the website, the investor page, and their LinkedIn. Show them some love. Like I said, I'm branding you the coolest company in Austin in terms of startups, and I'm excited to see what 2024 holds for you.
We'll take that. Thank you.
I appreciate it. Thank you, mate.
Okay, all the best.
Bye, mate.